In tonight's news edition, His Majesty the King holds talks with the German Chancellor during a visit to Berlin tomorrow. The Prime Minister checks on progress of an expansion project of the Al-Bashir Hospital. And the United States pledges sustained support for Iraq, but urges Iraqi leaders to take urgent steps to bring the country together. Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. His Majesty the King will start a working visit to Germany tomorrow for talks with Chancellor Angela Merkel. The situation in the Middle East and ways of cementing Jordanian-German ties will dominate the Berlin talks. Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour called on the Bashir Public Hospital to check on expansion and modernization work underway at the Amman Medical Facility. The third phase of the hospital's expansion, now underway, is to cater for a growing number of patients and to raise the quality of health service at the medical facility serving East Amman. The development scheme entails expansion of the internal medicine, surgery, X-ray, operation theaters, pharmacy, rehabilitation and physiotherapy, ICU and CCU wards. Mansour, accompanied by Minister of Health Ali Hiyasat and State Minister for Media Affairs Mohammed Momani, also inspected the accident and emergency ward. He was briefed by the hospital's director Issam Shreide on the hundreds of patients and injuries the emergency ward deals with daily. Mansour talked with patients and took note of their observations and complaints in terms of the quality of service and delays caused by red tape. Mansour instructed the hospital's management to ensure the best service is provided to citizens and to ease procedures for the tens of thousands using the hospital. Health Minister Hiyasat said the hospital currently has 1,100 beds that could be expanded to 1,500 under the plan and is run by 850 doctors, including 250 specialists. Separately, the Prime Minister said the Jordanian citizens' health and the safety of their food and medicine is a paramount priority to his government. He said state authorities and entities monitoring food, medicine, and all other projects are the line of defense to fend off risks to citizens. Mansour said during a visit to the Food and Drug Administration and the Standards and Metrology Corporation that all food and drugs monitoring bodies should join forces and upgrade their work using up-to-date scientific criteria. He said the Food and Drug Administration, which was awarded the top honor of Al-Istiqlal Medal this year, deserved this token award for its important role, which directly affects the citizens' health and safety of the economy through ensuring quality. Mansour emphasized justice while equally enforcing the law on all citizens, noting the administration adopts the scientific approach using world-class criteria. At the Standards and Metrology Corporation, where he was joined by Minister of Industry, Trade and Supply Hatem Halwani, the Prime Minister said Jordan made wide strides as its economy grew. He said the kingdom had taken the lead in the introduction and application of specifications, urging the agency to protect its credibility and strictly apply regulations. A man was killed and 7 others were wounded, including 3 gendarmerie personnel, during an operation by security forces to arrest a wanted man in the southern city of Amman. A security source at the Gendarmerie Department said a joint force of the Gendarmerie and the public security this morning raided a house in Amman where the fugitive, who was wanted on 15 security offenses, was hiding. It said some armed persons inside the house and nearby homes began shooting from several directions, and the security force returned the fire, resulting in 1 death and 4 injuries. It said the injured were transferred to the Amman Government Hospital, where they were listed in a fair condition. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry promised intense and sustained U.S. support for Iraq, but he said the divided country would only survive if its leaders took urgent steps to bring it together. Hours before Kerry arrived in Baghdad, Sunni tribes who have joined a militant takeover of northern Iraq seized the only legal crossing point with Jordan. This left troops with no presence along the entire western frontier, which includes some of the region's most important trade routes. This report has more.
Iraqis have pinned hopes that a visit to Baghdad by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry will help the country find a political solution to the country's crisis. The conflict has escalated after a Sunni insurgency swept much of the country's north and west. U.S. President Barack Obama has offered up to 300 American advisors to Iraq, but the president held off granting Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki's government's request for airstrikes to counter the 2-week advance by militants. Officials have, meanwhile, called for Iraqis to form an inclusive government. The insurgency has been fueled largely by a sense of marginalization and persecution among Iraqi Sunnis. Kerry landed in Baghdad this morning to press Maliki to form a more inclusive government to quell insurgents from the ISIL.
The key today was to get from each of the government leaders a clarity with respect to the road forward in terms of government formation. And indeed, Prime Minister Maliki firmly, on multiple occasions, because it was a great part of the conversation, affirmed his commitment to July 1st as the date when the representatives will convene and when they must choose a speaker and then a president and then the prime minister. And he committed to try to move that process as expeditiously as possible.
Hussein Karim, an Iraqi citizen, was optimistic that Kerry's visit would have a positive effect on the situation in the country. He said the visit showed the United States recognized the scale of the crisis. The militant offensive, spearheaded by the ISIL, has led to the seizure of 2 cities and continues to engulf majority Sunni areas of the country. Iraq's defense ministry said it thwarted an ISIL attack targeting Beiji refinery in Salahuddin province, killing a number of militants and destroying vehicles and bulldozers. In Baghdad, large numbers of Iraqis continue to flock to recruitment centers to join the armed forces in their fight against the insurgency. And as the situation deteriorates, more than 500,000 Iraqis have fled home in the past week as ISIL fighters advanced in the capital Baghdad. Stories of kidnapping, sectarian vengeance, and executions have caused widespread panic. Hastily erected refugee camps are providing basic shelters, but conditions in the extreme heat are hard. Farah Ajlouni for the news at 10.
During a Security Council meeting on the Middle East, UN Undersecretary General for Political Affairs Jeffrey Feltman raised concerns about the worsening Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Feltman addressed the detaining of more than 37 Palestinians by Israel's army as it searches for 3 missing teenagers. Israel has extended a crackdown on the Hamas group it accuses of kidnapping them in what was widely condemned as a collective punishment. Hospital officials in the West Bank said 4 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces since the search for the teenagers began. Palestinian UN Ambassador Riyad Mansour condemned the Israeli action associated with the search for the missing teenagers. Feltman said Israel needed to exercise restraint in its search for the teenagers.
The rising death toll as a result of Israeli security operations in the West Bank is alarming. We condemn all killing of civilians and call for an investigation into any such deaths. Reportedly, the Israeli cabinet also voted to impose harsher conditions on detainees affiliated with Hamas who are in Israeli custody. As the search for the missing youth continues, we call for restraint in carrying out the security operations in strict compliance with international law and avoiding punishing individuals for offenses they have not personally committed.
The fact that the Israeli authorities are engaged in a search operation for individuals that were in Area C does not allow them under international law to collectively punish the entire nation of Palestine, including the attacks on the Gaza Strip. Therefore, we are asking the Security Council to shoulder its responsibility to stop this aggression against our people.
In occupied East Jerusalem, extremist Jews went on a rampage, vandalizing Arab cars and slashing their tires. It was an apparent attack by hardline Israeli settlers against Palestinians in the occupied city. The latest act of vandalism had the hallmark of a so-called price tag attack, a term used by militant Israeli settlers who say they will exact a price for Palestinian attacks or any attempts by the Israeli government to curb settlement activity in the occupied West Bank. Police said one vehicle's wheels were torched in the car park of the East Jerusalem neighborhood of Beit Hanina. Graffiti sprayed on a car read in Hebrew, "All Arabs." Other cars had slash marks and their tires flattened. Price tag attacks in the past have targeted churches, monasteries, and Palestinian mosques, homes, and property. 3 Al Jazeera journalists were jailed for 7 years in Egypt after a court convicted them of helping a terrorist organization by spreading lies. The White House called the verdict a blow to the democratic progress in Egypt. UN Human Rights Chief Navi Pillay said Egypt should free the journalists and stop mass trials of government opponents. Here are the details.
3 Al Jazeera journalists on trial in Egypt accused of helping the Muslim Brotherhood have been jailed for 7 years each. Australian Peter Grest, Mohammed Fahmy, a Canadian-Egyptian national, and Baha Mohammed, who's Egyptian, were sentenced on Monday. All 3 were convicted on charges which include helping a terrorist organisation by publishing lies. Baha Mohammed's been given an extra 3 years over alleged arms possession offences. Australian Foreign Minister Julie Bishop is condemning the sentence.
The Australian government is shocked at the verdict in the Peter Grester case. We are deeply dismayed by the fact that a sentence has been imposed, and we are appalled by the severity of it.
The journalists denied the charges against them. Al Jazeera, whose Qatar backer supports the Muslim Brotherhood, ruled a terrorist organisation by Egypt, has said the allegations are absurd. Another 11 defendants were sentenced in absentia to 10 years. Human rights groups say the case shows Egyptian authorities are trampling on freedom of expression. Egyptian officials say the 2 issues are unconnected.
Britain's Foreign Secretary William Hague warned Russia that the European Union was ready to impose more sanctions over the crisis in Ukraine if necessary. Hague said the bloc's 28 member states would likely want to see how Moscow responded to Ukraine's peace plan and a unilateral ceasefire before making any decisions. The EU has already imposed several rounds of sanctions against Russia over its actions in Ukraine. EU foreign ministers approved new rules prohibiting the imports of goods originating in Crimea into the EU. Later in the week, heads of state and government of the EU hold a summit in Brussels this week and could take decisions on sanctions.
Extremely important to be able to support what President Poroshenko is trying to do. Calm and peace is essential for the future of the country, for not just the obvious reasons of preventing people being killed or injured, but also for the country to be able to go forward. So all efforts to be able to engage in the neighbourhood to ensure that we get peace and security will be essential. And we'll be looking.
A pizza chain in a northern Russian city began deliveries by drone. The first chopper drone delivery was met with applause by witnesses on the city's main square. Initially, drone deliveries will be used for active sales in the city parks, beaches, and a university campus by tablet, yielding pizza salesmen who will take an order and request a drone to arrive. The company plans to eliminate any human input in pizza delivery very soon. The drone is equipped with a video camera monitored by the restaurant's manager, who will call the customer at the time of delivery to make sure the pizza is received by those who paid for it. Once the manager sees that the customer has come outside, the drone will lower a pizza to the ground using a cable. Over to the World Cup 2014, fans of the Netherlands and Chile were both feeling confident as they entered the arena in Sao Paulo, knowing that both their teams have already qualified for the next round. Nevertheless, the Netherlands managed to beat Chile 2-0. Jermaine Lens replaced the suspended Robin van Persie for the Netherlands after he received 2 yellow cards in the first 2 games. The winners grabbed Group B's top spot and avoided the likelihood of meeting host Brazil in the last 16. Speaking of Brazil, later tonight they will go head-to-head against Cameroon, which is the reason why my colleague Alia Touqan is off tonight. Fingers crossed, Alia. In last night's game between Algeria and South Korea, the Desert Foxes opened the goal-scoring floodgate and swamped South Korea 4-2 in a thrilling World Cup Group H clash. After seeing a 28-year World Cup goal drought and in a 2-1 loss to Belgium in their opener, the Algerians unleashed a goal-scoring spree with the players all finding the net in an astonishing first-half display of all-out attacking football. Algeria's first World Cup victory since 1982 moved them into second place in the group on 3 points behind Belgium and are now in pole position to earn a spot in the knockout phase. And finally, fair weather continues in most parts of the country with northwesterly moderate winds. Tomorrow, normal summer conditions prevail with northwesterly moderate to brisk winds. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect hot conditions tomorrow with northerly moderate to brisk winds and calm seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. To end the news, here's a reminder of our top stories. His Majesty the King holds talks with the German Chancellor during a visit to Berlin tomorrow. The Prime Minister checks on progress of an expansion project of Al-Bashir Hospital. And the United States pledges sustained support for Iraq, but urges Iraqi leaders to take urgent steps to bring the country together. With that, we come to the end of tonight's news. I'm Nancy Khair. Thank you for watching and have a good night.